reached out to the chief of Little Black Bear First Nation and said, I want to start doing some work for my home community because my intention is to move out there next summer. And so that's been my plan. The chief first got me involved working with our organic farm out on Little Black Bear. It had been years and years since we'd had anybody farming out in our community, and he wanted to make that change to organic farming. So I came on and helped with the certification of that program and that project. And that went well, and I kept doing ECDev projects. And then this past year, I got kind of bumped up to CEO of Walk Use Developments, which is Little Black Bear's ECDev and lands holding company. So I have a few different projects that I'm working on there. But the reason they asked me here today is to speak about our aquaponics project, which I'm very, very excited about. For those of you who might not have heard the word aquaponics before or don't know what that is, it's a really cool concept. Basically, we're taking aquaculture, which is fish farming, just farming of fish, and that can be done in different ways. But because we're in Saskatchewan, it's done in a big building, not in lakes or not in the ocean. And then hydroponics, which is growing plants in water without soil. So usually these are in floating beds or different tiered systems, that type of thing. So when you put those two businesses together, you get aquaponics. And so the project that we have in mind and the big dream that we're working on, we're in phase 3 right now, is a big aquaponic system. It'll fit on 1 acre of land, and half of that will be growing rainbow trout from hatchling until they can go on your plate. And it takes about 16 months to get from that little hatchling to be able to sell to people to go on your plate. And because it takes 16 months, every 12 weeks, we're adding another 25,000 rainbow trout to the system. And so once we get up to that full capacity, we're going to be doing about 125 metric tons of fish per year that we'll be able to deliver. And the great part about this system is all the wastewater that comes from those fish transfers to the other side of the greenhouse, where we'll be growing plants, leafy greens on these floating beds. And we'll be able to do about 90,000 pounds of leafy greens and produce per year as well. And we don't need any fertilizer. We don't need any of that because it's getting everything it needs from the wastewater from the fish system. So it's basically 2 businesses under 1 roof. It works really well together. And as far as I'm concerned, it checks off so many boxes for what I'm trying to bring to our First Nation. Number 1, it's a huge food sovereignty piece. Very important, especially the higher prices that we're getting on groceries. Constantly, those things keep going up. To be able to bring a system that's providing fresh, delicious produce to your community is very important and something that I'm excited about. Also, it's a job driver. This facility that we're building is going to have create 6 full-time jobs as well as part-time jobs on the days that we're doing harvesting. So it's a fantastic system. We're building in that option to feed everybody on our First Nation before we're even thinking about getting money back and selling to other people. So it's a great project. I'd like to talk to everybody about it, and I could talk for a long time about it. It's something I'm excited about. So please come and hit me up afterwards, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. But that's the big project I'm working on now.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Shane. And that sounds like a ton of work. And again, from what I've seen, that's the only First Nation that I've seen really doing that successfully. And congrats on going into phase 3. We'll come back more because I want to talk more about that and your future plans, some of the challenges, whatnot. Terry, my friend over here, how's politics treating you?
Oh, we're getting by.
Yeah, it's all right.
That's all we can ask, I guess, eh?
Yeah. So Terry, no, it's been good. My role with the Ministry of Agriculture has been as the Provincial Indigenous Engagement Specialist, where I've been able to meet with Terry and go out and enjoy their powwow they had this past year and also keep up that relationship. They have a few different projects coming up. So I'll throw that over to you. I know you have some bison coming. You have the livestock, 4C Farms. If you just want to give a quick briefing on that, and then we can get into some of the questions around that, that journey. It's been a big journey.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dustin. And thank everyone for giving us the time up here to try explain or lead or lighten up everybody on what we're doing within agriculture. And that's what I'm all about. First off, I'll explain I'm not Terry Bird. That's a different bio that got mixed up. It's the name is similar, but but I don't have quite that line of accreditation behind my name. I learned everything through the fields of agriculture and a little bit training outside of that, SciAS and all that, mainly from my mom and dad on the mixed farms that they had throughout their life. I come from about 3 generations of farmers and ranchers, and here I am. But back in 2007, excuse me, I was working in the lands office, our TLE lands office as the land leasing officer, and I took me a while to figure out what was going on there. Like, we bought a bunch of land or north of the valley in the Grayson, Dubuque area. There's really marginal land, very unproductive farmland. It was more or less cattle land, but it wasn't developed, and we couldn't lease it out. The non-First Nation farmers that sold the land to us, they sold it because they wouldn't sell that land to their own sons, even if the sons wanted to farm there. They had a rough time making a living on that land. So when us as First Nations started buying land, they come and sold us that land, and we end up with huge tracts of land that we couldn't lease out. So they held a monopoly on us, leasing that land at their rates. So we partnered with Sask Ag and Ducks Unlimited and Sask Water and AFIF back then, and did everything we could, got all the professional help we could to seed the marginal lands into forage production, pasture lands, and fenced it all. And as we developed that land and made it more productive, them same farmers that sold us the land because they couldn't make a living on it, and they wouldn't sell it to their own sons. After we improved it vastly through different grasses and permanent stands, they were tripping over themselves to come back and lease it from us. So, you sit back and say, what's wrong with this picture here? First, they didn't want it. Now they're almost fighting each other for it. So took a good study of that and seen that now they were making more money off that land that they didn't want. And we were getting very little, a very small margin, that profit. So I approached the chief and council, and we developed a plan to develop a ranch. Start with a ranch. Let's buy a few cows and start growing the herd. And as we grew the herd, we'll train our band members to become ranchers. That was basically the start of 4C Farms and Ranch. As it grew more successful, we built our herd a bit. Then we start farming a little bit. Same thing on that marginal land north of the valley. We had a hard time to create a profit on there, pay the bills. So again, we approached the chief and council, said, if you want us to farm, give us the best farmland we have. Why let our neighbors farm the land and take all the margins home? So we moved to south of the valley where our land is tabletop flat, and we got the topsoil there is 8 inches thick, nice black topsoil. So we started farming that, and immediately seen some success. We were able to pay the bills. We were able to buy machinery. We were able to employ people, and just grew from there like you wouldn't believe. We started off farming 350 acres north of the valley, and now we're at 6,000 acres south of the valley. We were started off at 102 cows when I came back to help, and now we're at 250 cows. We improved the genetics vastly through selection, culling our cows hard and buying better bulls and using genetics to the maximum extent. What I'd like to say is when we first started, our returns per cow, the way I value the returns per cow is after we sell the calves, we take off what it costs to keep that cow for a year that raised that calf. Take that cost off, and whatever is left is that's our margin. So we were getting, maybe our margins were about $380 per cow after we sold the calf and paid all the bills for that cow. So through genetic selection and proper breeding and culling, in 5 years, we increased that margin from 380 to last year. After we sold the calves, the margins were up to $1,540 per cow. That's just through herd improvement. Thank you. Thank you. That's through herd improvement and top quality bulls. That's the message I'd like to send out here. If you're gonna raise something, if you're gonna raise any cattle or livestock, don't buy what you could afford. Buy the best you could afford. If you're gonna raise a cow, raise the best cow you can, and it'll pay off. They'll all pay off. It goes further than that. Our plan was to, with all this TLE land that's scattered around the First Nation, and to introduce agriculture back to our members, we would like to put individuals out on them little blocks of land. After our herd grows big enough, our cattle herd grows big enough, then we could help them. We could loan them cattle for 3 to 5 years. and they could develop their own cows. We'll coach them along, we'll help them along. Then after 5 years, if we let them 5, we'll go back and get 5 back, and they keep all the rest of the cows. That's self-sustainability. That's being sustainable in the cattle production. Now we hope to do the same thing with the grain farmers. We want to introduce agriculture in the classroom. The best way we think that's going to do is introduce agriculture in the classroom and get the kids thinking about agriculture. Maybe build a greenhouse so they can grow their own lunch program, vegetables, and get them interested enough that they go on to the School of Agriculture or Sask Polytech and learn about agriculture practices. Get them to see that there is a very lucrative and satisfying lifestyle in the fields of agriculture. I could see it because we grew up in agriculture through mom and dad. Our children could see that now, but it's in the First Nation population. I'd say we're 2, maybe 3 generations removed from the agriculture I seen when I was a kid. Now everybody's out working. Nobody's farming, nobody's raising cattle. Very few of us, and that's what we'd like to introduce to make use of the land settlements that they've got to fulfill the treaty negotiations. That was the purpose of them, to get our people back on the land, make them more sustainable. In a nutshell, that's about what it is. And I could speak more on it, and I'd like to, but I'll leave some time for Ken too. He has a lot to tell you.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Ken, for leaving me there. Yeah, and with that, we got to get going. It's the politician coming out there. Here we go. No, and Ken, thank you very much for your patience. Ken, very interesting fact about him for those of you who may not know in the room. He's a professional agrologist, and for the First Nations professional agrologists in this region, there's got to be maybe less than 10, less than 5. It's a very small number, but Ken was one of the first, and now he's working with Pasqua Developments, and they have some huge plans there. So Ken, I'll let you go ahead and touch on Pasqua Developments, what's going on there, and even some of your journey being one of the lone professional agrologists here in Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you. Does it work? So, first, want to see where I start. Where should I? More or less. Thank you, guys. Like, good to sit with people about this connection to the land, to this agriculture, what it's called agriculture. So I want to give thanks to that lady that made me think, this morning, made me feel, just, humble with respect to the past. And I sometimes think about the past when it comes to the old people and the opportunities that exist today that didn't exist before. So I also want to thank FHQ, for inviting me from Uchap. Grew up in Uchap. Didn't graduate high school. But when I got older, and had kids, started feeling more responsible, needed to do something. I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have family that farmed, but my stepdad was from cows that used to farm back in the Siam days. My sister married this Blackfoot. I told her not to marry him, but anyway. So, but very nice people, Blackfoot country, Siksika. So I worked out at a ranch in Siksika, and this connection that I felt with the land, the cattle, I was like, I gotta come back. I gotta come back home. I need to get educated. I need to start making more money. And because of that connection to that land, I chose to get a degree in agriculture. And didn't know what agriculture was. All I knew was that, okay, go to town, and on a bus in Broadview from Old Chap, and I'd see all this gray land. And I thought, okay, I need to go and learn as much as I can about it. I started with SIFC, and I felt so comfortable with SIFC because it was all First Nation, and they were older, and we had kids. And I told the counselor at SIFC I wanted to get a degree in agriculture, and she said, well, we don't offer it here. And I said, I know, but I want to take first year arts and science. So I transferred to the College of Agriculture. I think it was 97. And I was the only First Nation in the whole college, and so I had a decision I needed to make. I want to stay here and have all these eyes look at me. And I thought, holy cow, this is kind of like overwhelming. Yes, overwhelming. So a professor told me there's a book out there called Lost Harvest by Sarah Carter. So I read this book and changed my perspective. And I got my degree in May of 2000, agronomy specializing in crops. They told me at the college, Dr. Lee Campbell said, you don't have to look for a job. My fellow students were taking summer jobs. And I said, okay, well, how come I don't have to look for a job? Well, because you're Indigenous, you're self-identified, they're going to offer you a job. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good. That's a kind of a benefit to more or less being the only Indigenous, I thought. And so I wasn't getting a call last month of university, and I'm like, holy shit, maybe I should look for a job. 6 companies phoned, Farm Credit Canada being one. And I didn't know very much about FCC, but I took the job with FCC. And it's financing, it's banking. And when I got into FCC in Yorkton, I don't know if they were ready for me or I was ready for them, but I knew that they weren't ready for First Nations to come and borrow money for agriculture. And they didn't see a vision that they had for me there. So I chose to leave FCC and got a call from the FSIN. And with the FSIN, I was able to travel right across Saskatchewan, just about to every First Nation. And I was talking to Larry Oakes. I don't know where Larry is, but that was one First Nation that I didn't visit. So I felt bad. So married my wife. She's from kind of from Nikini. I don't know if that counts for anything. Anyways, I think I should kind of stop there. So, with respect to Pasqua, I met Richard Missons, and if you ever met Richard, kindest man, you know, very good heart, and very encouraging, and always wanted a First Nations boss, and because they, I think, understand, you know, First Nations people a lot better than non-First Nations people. It's not that there's that much of a difference, but there is a difference with respect to when you're growing up in a community and you understand certain things. So to work with Richard, work with Pasqua, is to use all of my years of experience to provide more or less the best information that I can so that they could make the most due diligent decision with respect to grain farming, with respect to horticulture, with respect to irrigation, with respect to many other things that I could talk about with respect to how I see agriculture in terms of development, because there's so much that we can do in agriculture, you know, that we're not doing yet, but we are the largest land owners in all of Canada, and we're not. I hope I don't look like a Hutterite today, but there was lots of references with respect to Hutterite colonies and First Nations. But I think we've got, you know, a situation or a plan, you know, to become really, really concrete in terms of agriculture and the investment that it's needed, you know, by federal, provincial governments and private organizations. So I'll stop there.
There we go. Well, let's give it up for our panel here, everyone. Like, thank you very much for those. One of the things that I've seen within our region is there's so few people in First Nations actively involved with agriculture. We have a few upcoming startups here. You know, we have the panelists on stage and the developments and the businesses and farms that they represent. Beyond this, if we were to go up north, you'd maybe have Thunder Farms. I know Onion Lake is doing some things as well. How would you like to see from everybody in this room, because there's so many different factions here, different businesses and whatnot, how would you like to see them support Indigenous agriculture in Saskatchewan, and especially with First Nations? I'll start with you here.
Sure. How could everybody support agriculture? You know, all of our projects that we're talking about up here are very different, right? And every First Nation that's doing agriculture for themselves are going to be at a different capacity for how they're able to do that agriculture, for who they have as workers. I was talking at our table earlier about how our First Nation, there had been a big gap in years since there had been any farming on our First Nation. Historically, we had people who were fantastic farmers who were sent from the residential schools to the File Hills farming colony. Even though they were from Little Black Bear, they ended up living in Pepicasees, and that farm did so well and was doing so well that the neighboring farmers kind of were taking offense to it and said, you know, we got to slow these guys down. We're not able to sell our stuff because this First Nations farm is doing so well, right? And they kind of kiboshed that farm for a little bit. So we've had years of fantastic farmers and different communities full of these, but there's been some gaps. We're just getting back into that farming, and we're really lucky that we have leadership that's supporting our community, putting some dollars into our cattle operation, into our farming operation. The leadership that has the vision to want it to be organic, to see what would that look like and what can we do there. I think if you're trying to support those people, it's just spreading the word about what people are doing. If there's an option to buy products from those farms or those things, then absolutely do that. Share any social media things that those people are doing in the same way that you support your friends that have small businesses. You know, support these First Nations that are doing these things as well. You're going to do some shopping this year for some meat for your family. Look up some of these guys over here and purchase from them. These are ways that in a real tangible way, you can be supporting these First Nation businesses. The bigger that they grow, the more savings they're going to offer for you, and maybe the more they'll expand their operations into other communities. I'm not interested in just feeding my First Nation. I'm hoping that what we do is we prove that aquaculture is something that can work, that can feed our First Nation. And if this works, let's blueprint this. Let's hammer them out. Let's start feeding all the nations in this way, right? We shouldn't need to put things on a plane or on a train or on a bus or send it halfway across the world to be able to feed people if we're able to grow it right next to us. So I'd say just really in small, tangible ways, support people, share their things, and just talk about it. And yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. How far away are we from getting little black bear rainbow trout? If anybody wanted to go pick some up right now.
Okay, so we just finished, or we're just wrapping up phase 3 of our plan. It's been about 3 years that we've been working on this, developing of our business plan. We had to make sure that our ground could support the structure. So we did geotechnical surveys. We had to make sure that we had the water supply coming in. So we had to do a well and do a pressure test for those types of things. In phase 3 right now, we've purchased our greenhouse and we're bringing the training to our First Nation. I spoke about wanting to bring jobs to our First Nation. We have a lot of young people out there that want jobs, but don't necessarily want to leave the First Nation or don't have a desire to go somewhere else. So to bring this to our First Nation and try to offer those jobs is one way we can do that. We can do online training, but not everybody likes online training or to zoom in they like more hands-on stuff. So to address that, we've been bringing the person who designed our aquaponics side and the horticulture side. They're coming out and doing training in our community for anybody who's interested in jobs or anybody who just has questions about the facility. Hosting these events so people can come and learn about it, hopefully get excited about it. We had a rainbow trout feast a couple of weeks ago where we brought some in. It'll be the same type of product that we offer. And we, had candied trout salad and rainbow salad sandwiches and all these types of things so people could try and see what it's going to be like to have those options in our community.
All right. I could go on and on about that because I'm a pickerel man myself from the north. So, but I'll get into rainbow trout. If I start seeing it, I'm going to try it out. Moving over to here to Terry. I wanted to talk a little bit too on not only that resilient agriculture, but how you've talked about in the past, how it's also restoring the land and kind of bringing back the land, I guess, in a healthier way with the way that the cattle move around with the seedlings in the grass. If you wanted to enlighten some of the people here on that, that'd be awesome.
Yes, yeah. I had the opportunity to do a couple documentaries with I guess I was at Spirit Talker. I brought them out there and I can't really remember all. I was with National Farmers Union. They had the National Farmers Union conference in Quebec or Ottawa last fall. So they were seeking Indigenous content to their conference. So somehow in Ottawa, they knew about 4C Farms. Of course, we got some pretty big funding from Ottawa. So 4C Farms is on the map there as far as I know. So they looked for Indigenous content. They looked up 4C Farms and got a hold of me to come and see the land and do a documentary. While we were out there doing a documentary, I was speaking about what we do, which is could go directly to your question, how we look after the land. And we were actually down there looking at the soil and digging it up and seeing what this was. This was very unproductive land when we purchased it, and through putting it to permanent cover and grazing the land, putting the cattle over the land and rotating them and letting it grow and build soil tilth, regenerating the land. I took a bunch of studies with holistic resource management. I went to the first course Alan Savory ever held out here when he came from Africa. It was Bragg Creek, Alberta in the late 70s, 1976, I think. Then I attended 3 other courses and I really got hooked on holistic resource management. And by my connection to agriculture, I want to learn all I can about it. From there, I went on to sustainable farming and regenerative farming. And when I was doing the documentary with National Farmers Union, we were taking a good study of the land. And all of a sudden I realized, hey, you know what? I'm doing all this. We're doing all that. We're doing holistic resource management. We're doing sustainable farming. We're doing regenerative farming, and we didn't know it just by looking after the land the way it should be looked after, the way our forefathers looked after it. Our cattle will never go hungry. Even in drought, we have enough big enough land base to look after that with proper management. And the help we get, if some people think there's a barrier out there that ends at the First Nation line, I'd like to tell them there's no barrier at all. There's more help out there. People want to help us. Doesn't matter which department or entity you approach, whether it's Farm Credit Corporation or Sask Ag or Sask Crop Insurance. It goes on and on and on. No matter who I reach out to for professional help, technical help, it's there. They just want to help First Nation people succeed. It's not just our own people, it's the general population and governments of Saskatchewan and Canada. They want to help us get ahead. That's their mandate. And I think it does them good political wise too, if they show they're helping First Nation become successful, sustainable peoples. And that's our goal. with our land. We are land-based, and if it wasn't for our land holdings and us being First Nation, there'd be no First Nations. There'd be no Indian reserves, as we call it in the past. May not be politically correct to use that term now. But we are the ones that make our First Nations with the land and the membership. The main thing I'd like to tell out here is there's no barriers. There's more help out there than you could ever dream of, whether it's farm, like I'll say again, farm credit, Saskag. Just go up there and pick up the phone and search someone, Google it. That's a very good tool right now. And talk to your neighbors, form good relationship with your neighboring farmers off the reserve. We could pick up the phone now and phone any one of them if we're having trouble with our seeding rate or our fertilizer rate. And it seems like they want to help us. They all want to have their hands in and have their part to say, I helped them. That's the way I see it. There's no barriers. There's more help out there than we could imagine. I was getting on something there and I lost my train of thought. Crazy. Yeah, but I'd like to, I reached out to the biggest landholder in Canada, which is kind of crazy. Robert Angelic. The majority of his land holding is in Saskatchewan, just north of us, around us, the Esterhazy, Stockholm, Grayson, Dubuque area. He has huge tracts of land. And when I was trying to get a hold of him, just a small person, just native person, he didn't want to talk to me. But he buys land and he leases out. That's his business. He buys land solely to lease out. So I thought one day I'm going to phone him. I phoned him and told whoever answered the phone that, hey, we got a bunch of land in the Grayson, Dubuque area that we want to sell. 15 minutes later, he phoned me. He was talking to me. and really all I wanted to do was pick his brain as to what he was doing. So once I got him on the phone, it's hard to get, I wouldn't let him go. But but he ended off telling me, and he was asking me questions too, and he said, what are you guys doing to your land? I said, the majority of our land we're leasing out, and I'm not happy with the margins we're getting back. And he says he's doing the same thing. And then I explained our 4C farms where we're cropping it ourselves, and he just couldn't say enough about what we were doing with the margins we're making. And the biggest thing that I got from him is him as the biggest landholder in Canada. He doesn't farm 1 acre of that land, but he ended up telling me that if he was trying to buy a certain piece of land anywhere in Canada, and there was a local farmer, a local owner operator that wanted to buy that land, he couldn't compete with him. Because once you buy that land, you take all of the margin home. It pays for itself and you take the margin home. That's what he instilled in my mind. So that kind of told me what we're striving to do on Cowessess First Nation at 4C Farms is farm our own land and take all of that margin home that our neighboring white farmers are taking home. They're taking that, or they're paying us a little bit of rent, and they're taking all the rest of the profits home, and maybe not treating our land as good as we would, our own land. They're doing the best they can. They're putting all the inputs in they can to grow a good crop, which they have to do. They have to make their payments same as everybody else. But when we're farming our land, we do our due diligence. We do our soil tests to improve the land. We put in what we need with the cost of the agricultures and fertilizer or chemicals and fertilizers. We can't over fertilize. We set our goal as to what our yield we want to be, how much bushels we need per acre, and we apply just the amount of fertilizer that we need. You can't over fertilize. Otherwise your margins are going to go down again. You won't make as much money. So we look after the land. The way we're farming now is zero till. Is we're building soil every year as we farm. And we learned how to do that through our partnership with Saskatchewan Agriculture, with all the entities we work with. Even if I talk to FCC, Farm Credit Corporation, they want to help us. They want to help us give us the technical advice as how to pull the maximum margins off our land, the maximum benefits off our land without hurting it. We always got to leave enough in there to grow next year or 3 years down the road. When we're planning our crop for next year, we we're actually looking ahead 3 years down the road as to what we're gonna grow 3 years from now. So crop rotation is very important too. Even what you spray on the land this year, if I have one field that I want to grow peas next year, I got to be very, very aware of what I spray on it this year. And how do I know that? By our partnerships we form with Saskatchewan and all the technical people. You know, I wasn't born with all that knowledge. There's other people out there that knowledge that we use. And I'll say, the barriers aren't there. Knock them barriers down, go out there and look after your land. And in the end, it'll turn out to looking after your First Nation, the band membership, and I can't speak enough about that. That's what that land is there for us, and let's make the most use of it. And we're always ready to talk to anyone and help anyone, and that's my goal. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Terry. And then just on the technical aspect, you talk about the supports that are there. I'm just going to single out, we have a few of our program support specialists from the Ministry of Agriculture, Jason Falk and Sheila Miller. If you want to give a wave to the room, if anybody's looking for the supports from the province, we've been able to come out and meet with Ken Bear. We're willing to come out to Little Black Bear, any First Nation as well. So on the provincial side, I can say that we are doing our best to make sure we get out there with those supports. That was one of the major things that we talked about with Pasco Farms. We're able to meet with them. You have a huge expansion coming up over there, don't you, Ken? What is that next few years, like the next few years? Because I remember it was looking at about 10 to 12,000 new acres, I believe, right? Is that the size we were looking at over there?
No,
What was the size? Correct me. I want to make sure I get this right. It was a big size.
I can't share that with you.
Oh,
I'm
it
just-
might have been 8 to 15 or 25, 30. I was so wrong. No. Okay, let's not unveil the huge plan here. Let's knock it back a bit. What do you see in Pasco Farms in the next couple of years?
So, how can I put this? So, I wanted to take a couple of First Nations from FHQ, and I took 75,000 acres just between two reserves. And they have this thing out there called a crop planning guide. And farmers, or when you're an advisor, you want to have some kind of supporting documents. So I just wanted to look at two crops, canola and wheat. I wanted just to kind of put some numbers based on what a financial institution would look at, but kind of what industry, kind of what farmers, it's just a general, but you negotiate individually, you know, with different companies. But seed, chemical, and fertilizer, just for 75,000 acres with 2 of the 11 First Nations, is, I could say, $20 million that farmers are going to go and purchase for seed, chemical, fertilizer if they're going to seed wheat and canola. So that's 2 First Nations. And I'm saying that this land that Terry was mentioning earlier that's rented, you know, by non-First Nations, that's the amount of money taken out of their pocket and given to these companies, you know, like Richardson Pioneer, Nutrient Ag, you know, just certain companies that sell the product, EASF. So does that have anything to do with that First Nation? I think it does, with respect to if the First Nations decided they didn't want to lease that land out, they wanted to let it sit. So that's $20 million of GDP, if you want to call it gross domestic product, that wouldn't go to these companies. So crop insurance. So crop insurance is offered, hail insurance is offered to farmers. So on their 75,000 acres, over $1 million of premiums, just kind of at the lower end premium, would be paid to crop insurance. But this is on 75,000 acres of First Nations land. So I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, if the farmers didn't farm the 75,000 acres, this $1 million wouldn't go to crop insurance. The last one is the product, so the canola and the wheat. And what's some kind of average prices $48 million off of the 75,000 acres of wheat and canola, half and half, would not be sold to companies, just from these two First Nations. So when I think of production, when I think of sustainability, when I think of encouragement with Pasqua, you know, we've got, and I think I'm okay in saying, I hope I am, that we're going to start with 3,500 acres. And so we're going to start seeding 3,500 acres. We've got Lyle Pegan, who I've never met Lyle before, but Lyle has 20 years of farming experience. I sit in between him and Terry. And to actually sit with two of these gentlemen, you know, one from Pasqua, one from Cowsis, and to talk farming, to talk what I know farmers do in towns. They'll have coffee, they'll go and sit, you know, for us to increase, you know, this connection between ourselves, but also with the youth. You know, get the youth to start talking, start communicating, start looking at agriculture as not just sitting on a tractor, not just spraying, but with Milton, you know, meeting Milton. He's in agriculture. You were in agriculture. You know, you're in agriculture. You know, these are areas that there could be a misconception, you know, that agriculture is just sitting on a tractor doing this, but there's so much connections. All of the things that I just listed and mentioned, these companies, you know, that do business with the First Nations, so not necessarily doing the business with the First Nation, but it's a connection to that First Nation. And I believe there's value in that. And I'm only talking two of the First Nations of FHQ, but there's 74, you know, so we really, really are a part of this agricultural economy here in Saskatchewan. And we need to start communicating, you know, that we're ready to do business. We're ready to get into production. We're ready to get into value added. We're ready to use our marketing niches. If we've got a market niche, you know, so I'll stop there because it's been around too long, I think.
No, thank you very much, gentlemen. And I want to leave a little bit of time at the end if anybody has any questions, but I think that that's completely accurate what you said on the way that you know, I think not only Saskag, the province, FCC, and whatnot have transformed over the last 5, you know, to 10 years. We've kind of seen that myself being newer within this space, seeing that, you know, we have flying dust now out of nowhere coming up huge, and FCC all of a sudden is everywhere, with Milton being you know, the extraordinaire that he is with a lot of First Nations. From that time, this brings me back to what you said earlier, Ken, when you were with at Yorkton FCC in 1996, around that time. How different is that? Like, is it just kind of a mind-blowing thing to see how FCC operates today from that time then, and the industry as a whole?
So I'll comment, and it was 2000 when I worked with FCC, and I didn't know anything about FCC. Like I was like, here's a job. I'm going to take this job. It's closer to a chap. I wanted to move back to a chap and drive back and forth, Yorkton. And they didn't care if I had bald tires, you know, on my vehicle. I had to be at FCC. And once I start understanding the credit checks, understanding the banking system, I wanted at least a manager of the FCC office or somebody in Regina to kind of give me a sense. Hey, you know, if you stay with FCC, we're going to have a sector specifically for Indigenous, you know, participation. I never heard that. I was just bound to lend money to farmers that came in, and I wanted First Nations farmers to come in. And I encouraged a past member from Old Chap to come in. And he came in and he sat down and he's like, "Hey, what do you got?" "Okay, I've got a 92 Datsun." And I said, "Well, what's it worth?" He said, 1,000. He wanted to get into greenhouses on the reserve. And I said, "Okay, well, we're going to mark 2,000, but strike that for an record." And I said, "What else do you have?" "That's it. That's it. That's it." That's all he had. But he had this want to get into greenhouse on the reserve. And I knew just with all of the training with FCC, there was too many things that were challenging and would be challenged with him. You know, building a greenhouse, the red flags they train you to put up. And today with FCC, with Milton, with Sean, with Trina that I'm working with Pasqua. She used to be a part of FCC. So FCC are encouraging, you know, First Nations to partake, you know, in their structure. What would be so beautiful is that if Milton and Sean and the others who are Indigenous and FCC to have this whole model of FCC, you know, but with this Indigenous portion, not tied to that boss. Because I think, you know, with Milton and with Sean and with the others, that they don't want to do anything different than, you know, to help First Nations grow in the sector. But all of these structures that are in place for corporations or whatever, I would say Pasco First Nation, Chapways First Nation. So we have our own nations with respect to the treaty. And just before I end, I just want to say that this relationship in Treaty 4 with the government of Canada and having agriculture as a part, you know, of Treaty 4 and me being a part of Treaty 4, as well as Terry, you know, and others, you know, is a sense of the old people, you know, that seen agriculture, you know, as part of this economic, you know, portion of how they would have to live today. And I'm hoping to continue to work to getting these tidbits of information to say $48 million of 75,000 acres is a lot of resources that's contributed to the province of Saskatchewan and Canada. Just 2 First Nations.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And speaking with Justine and FHQ, I said this panel could go on for quite a while because like there's so much stuff that we haven't even uncovered. I feel like we're just still getting into it, scratching the surface. I would encourage everybody in this room, you know, whatever organization or association you're with, to meet with these gentlemen, to talk to Shane, to talk to Terry, and also Ken here. There's a lot of supports and developments that I see have been needed, and there's a lot of room for us to grow this industry even more and more every year. As you said, the millions of dollars there. From the provincial side, you know, they have targets that are in the billions of dollars for revenue for agriculture every year. And we need to make sure that that First Nations component is growing a bigger percentage year over year over year. So that's what I'd like to see there. And then while I have the room quickly here, what we'd like to see from my point of view is more support for kind of the conferences or the workshops or seminars that we can do with Indigenous agriculture. And so if you're looking to support anything good this year, if your business has some money set aside to support some sort of sponsorships or workshops, Indigenous agriculture is the way, baby. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panel. Appreciate everybody. Do you want a final word here? I kind of left you quickly. We're good.
Good. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's go.
That's all good.
Thank you to our moderator, Dustin Ross Fiddler, and panelists Shane Belgard, Terry Leroy, and Kenneth Bear. So we appreciate the insight into how Indigenous peoples are continuing to stay connected to the land and are managing, harvesting, and honoring the land and resources from Mother Earth in modern times.
As Indigenous people, we are uniquely positioned to reclaim our food sovereignty and grow successful businesses. In order to support Indigenous businesses, many governments are developing procurement policies.
So our next speaker is here to share insight into federal government procurement opportunities to help build capacity for Indigenous businesses and communities and economic development corporations. So please welcome Sarah Hopkins from Three Sisters Consulting.
Anishik, thank you very much. Hard act to follow. I really appreciate what was being said. My company's in negotiations with Health Canada around a contract around food sovereignty. And so to hear that was just fascinating. It was great information. I appreciate that. I realize I'm standing between everyone here and break. So we're going to be engaged. We're going to be excited, and then we'll go have something to eat. So I wanted to start by saying Anishik to Kokum Brenda Dubois. When she spoke this morning, she challenged me to say good things, to say what's in here and to bring it out. So I appreciate that. Also, I'm very thankful to be on Treaty 4 territory. I acknowledge I'm a guest here, and I appreciate the invitation to come out as well. And the invitation from Justine and her team as well. I think they've done a great job today, and I appreciate being a part of that. So start with my presentation. We'll jump to the first page if I can figure out my thing. There we go. So just a little bit about what I want to talk about today. So we've got just up there a little bit kind of getting into who I am, who my company is, what we do, but then talking about the procurement and the work that we do there kind of at all levels and trying to give kind of a process, how we can do the work together. Before I get into that though, I want to kind of see who's in the room. So if you are a part of, or you're a leader within an Indigenous business, could I get you to stand up? Let's see who you are. If you're interested in procurement, do we have a lot of Indigenous businesses who are represented here? Excellent. Now, for those who work within procurement, you're looking for those Indigenous businesses. Can I get you to stand up? People who are in procurement. So those two groups, matchy. A break, take some time, get to know each other. The next slide. So this is actually, I'm pretty proud of this picture. This was our strat planning session last year. So Three Sisters Consulting, we're 5 years old, or we turned 5 last year. And this is the team at that point. We've since doubled in the group. And I'm pretty proud. My son works for us as well. So he's the tall guy in the back. And then my little guy, he's in the front. He thinks he has an office. So he sits in there and draws pictures. So he's a part of the team too. He talks about working for his big brother one day, not his mom. He wants to work for his big brother. A little about me, Quiganao Loma, Saranita Shinzi, Neongi El Napawi Lakawit, Niha Dilana Pawi Wak Damunzi Tukwal. So I'm Lenape, and about 2 generations ago, we were down to 1 speaker left. Now we have 6 teachers in our community, and one of them I'm very lucky to call my aunt, and she's helped me to learn my language. So I'm not far beyond the introduction, and which the first time I said it, it was terrible, but because there were so few speakers, nobody knew I wasn't speaking it right. So I appreciated that. So a few things about Three Sisters Consulting. I put some information on the board there just to share out. But a couple other things. We're a company that we do complex public engagement. So it's complex because we're working with our Indigenous communities across Canada. And the levels of complexity in our history are deep. And so we do a lot of work with a number of different government partners on the procurement side. And it's always a challenge. We're kind of sitting in the middle. Where the name Three Sisters Consulting came from is it's really based on that Three Sisters model of corn, beans, and squash growing together. They all have the objective of growth. They all do it very differently. So it's kind of exciting speaking after the agriculture group saying, oh, I have a connection, you know, it's exciting because it's a different way when you're looking at growth and how that works. You know, the corn stalk, it grows tall. It takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil. The beans are a vine. They need something to grow up. They put a lot of nutrients back into the soil. And the squash grows at the ground with these wide leaves and they keep the weeds back. So all three have a very unique way of growing, but they all want to do it together. That's the concept behind our company and what we do. So we do a lot of different work with Indigenous communities and organizations as well. That's the stuff, that's our heart work. That's the work that we do. So we do the government work, we connect people to each other, we build relationships, we help to educate different government departments on the work that they're doing and how important it is to have that conversation sitting with our people in the way that we choose to be engaged. Some of our community give back, what we do, we sponsor soccer teams, BMX groups. We're moving into sponsoring youth and sports, sponsoring teams where we can help out. I sit on a board of directors for Canadian Mental Health Association. That's very important work to what we do too. Mental health is very important, especially with our youth. We offer youth co-op programs. We do a lot of work with employment and training programs as well. And we're helping to grow as much as we can our Indigenous youth into business owners. Right shortly, we'll be adding an advisory circle to the work that we do. And we've had a lot of opportunity to reach out to a lot of people across the country. And some people are very interested in what we do. So we want to give them a voice too as to what we do in the future. On the federal procurement side, I thought it was important to share it with business owners and with corporations some of the work that's needed. It's very complex, it's confusing, and it's overwhelming. So for my company, it originally started in my spare room, not long before COVID. And it took over a year to go through all the different processes to even to get on a standing offer with the federal government. And it was a lot of writing, a lot of extra hours. It's not something you can just wake up one day and decide you're going to do. There's so many steps you need to take to do it. So to start the Canada Buys account, that's really where you want to investigate, to do a lot. I'll share on the next slide what that website looks like, but it's really your first kind of step into procurement. And there's a lot of information there that you can get. Also, if you take a look in the presentation as it's sent out, there's a lot of links. So all the stuff that I'm referencing, it's all in the links in the presentation. So feel free to take a look at that and share that out too. So the Canada Buys, that's the federal procurement bids and tenders site. You'll want to take a look there. You'll need things like your GST number, CRA number, procurement business number. So all of those numbers, all that information, you can find that on their website as well. It's not very easy to search. Actually, they used to have a different website for tenders. Then they did some engagement. They reached out to people and they looked at how they could make their site better. I'd say it's more difficult. I don't think they did a very good job, but we work with what we can, we navigate through. If anybody needs some help navigating through the site, we're happy to help. There's also a security screening process. So that takes a long time as well. So all these things take a long time to go through. So security, the security screening process could take a couple of months. It could take, I think with one of my employees, it took 1.5 years. So it's something to think and to plan kind of forward. So this is what the Canada Buy site looks like. It can be very confusing as you go through. A few things, there are search functions that are included. It can be difficult to kind of navigate. So you're investing a lot of time. Something you do want to take a look at too is the supply manual. There's a lot of information within there as well. So it helps you kind of with the step-by-step, the things you need to do. There's also information in there around, there's a non-competitive contracting process. It's a great way for small businesses to get started as well. So taking a look at that, that covers $25,000 for goods, $40,000 for services and construction. So it's smaller contracts. It's a great way to get your foot in the door and get started working with different departments as well. So the next page, let me turn this over here. So this is, right here, what I've got here is the Indigenous Business Directory. So this is something you can do off the start. It's great to go on there and be very clear with the services that your company provides. You can also take a look through, you search not codes, you can list them too. The federal government does use this site a lot. So we've had a few contracts that have come usually on the smaller side, but there's also been opportunities where when there hasn't been a lot of competition in different projects, they've reached out to us and said, are you interested? You know, this is something that we'd like to see if your company is interested in bidding on as well. So it's a great site to list what you do. One profile per entity. So you'll see us listed on there a couple of different times in different manners. So it's a great site to take a look on there. There's opportunities that come up as well, especially during like fiscal year end, where there's funding that's sitting there that they like to spend. So a great place to list your business as well. Next, on the provincial procurement side, this is one that's new to me, but I did list the information in there. Some things that I would suggest is when you go on the website, take a look, there's webinars on there. So you can learn more about procurement on the provincial side from those. There's guides, there's templates, there's a lot of information there. Also, they have a capital action plan. I'd suggest people take a look at that, see how your company fits in, or if you're thinking of starting your own business, take a look at where the majority of the funding is spent. And then take a look and see how that aligns with the work that you're willing to offer or what you can do. And then here on the municipal side of things. So this is some work that we've just stepped into as well. And I would suggest sites such as Nation Talk. You can access a lot of tenders there as well. So you can learn a lot this way. Taking a look, guiding your time there, that you can have the information delivered to your email daily. So that's great. And to spend some time in there, looking at what opportunities are there that you could bid on. There's a lot of different sites, a lot of different ways to do that. We've recently taken on a project from the city of Toronto, and this is where we found it, was on the municipal procurement site. Each municipality does things very different. It can be a long and frustrating process, and each municipality sometimes uses a different system that you've got to set up on. So whether it's MERCS or there's other different sites that you need to kind of get a little familiar with. So it helps also to have different supports or people that can help you along the way too. So that's where we've got, there's two options that I would suggest. So we work with both CCAB and CAMC. So CAMC is the Canadian Aboriginal and Minority Supplier Council. And then there's CCAB, so Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. So both have their good and bad, their pros and cons in the way that they do their work. So it's great to become a certified Indigenous business on either of these sites. Then you can share, like on our business cards, we have the emblem for CCAB to show that we're a registered Indigenous supplier. So I think that's important to have that listed. They also have business directories, so it's another way to get out information about what you do. And then they have different events that they have set up. So with different levels of government, so you can travel, to these different events. You can share the information about your business and meet up with other government departments to share the work that you do. So we've just recently started with CAMC. We've heard some really good things about them, but we're just getting started on working with them. The next piece I wanted to talk about is around partnerships. And so this is the piece where, for me, I've had a lot of different experiences. And so with the federal government, they've changed their, I guess their benchmarks. They're looking at 5% of their revenue going towards Indigenous businesses. They raised this from, I don't know if it was 2.53, it was somewhere around there previously. They weren't meeting that mark, and then they increased it. So part of the problem with that is there's a lot of small Indigenous businesses. Mine was one of them. And really, when you increase that level, it's kind of like sharks in the water, and you've just increased that. So there's a lot of non-Indigenous businesses that are looking to capitalize on Indigenous markets and those set aside projects. Looking for a partner is very difficult. And I've had some terrible experiences as well. So in one case, I was working with a large group, a large company, and they had bid many times on hydro projects. And they were turned down because they didn't have an Indigenous focus. They'd never worked with Indigenous communities before. So they reached out to my company. I thought it would be a great way to get involved in hydro projects. I saw a lot of potential there. So we started talking, working together. And they included my information on their response to the request for bids. So I was excited at this opportunity, this new group that I could work with. They got the contract, and it was based on the experience that I had working within Indigenous communities. And then they wrote me out of the contract, and they continued to do it their way. That is common. It's very common. Handshake deals, don't do them. Don't. They're not going to get you where you want to be. They're going to get your bigger partner where they want to be. I've had really great success with partners as well. So to the point, on one of the procurement projects, we have a joint venture. And so in developing our joint venture in response to the standing offer, I'd spent about 3 months with this partner. Friday afternoons, we talked about what we both did and how we could work together, how we could see working together. And so from that, we developed a new model. So I do a lot of in-person engagement. I like to meet with our people. I like to be in our communities. In this company, it was a non-Indigenous group, and they did a lot of online surveys, online work. So the owner of that company had said, wouldn't it be great if we could find something we could both do together? And for me, it was, I thought it was exciting, but I couldn't see how. So he was saying, taking that in-person engagement you do with Indigenous communities and putting it online. I thought that'll never work. That's not how we talk to each other. We like to talk to each other in person. That's what we do. And he said, well, let's just try. Let's see, what do you do? How do you do things? And then here's how we do things. So we spent every Friday, we take turns sharing something about what we do, something that made us unique. And then we started to see how we could work together and how we could kind of build that company together. So then we came up with this Indigenous online engagement. So it's Zoom calls, it's Teams calls, but it's in the way we like to talk to each other. We leave lots of time for introductions. We have elders involved. We have youth involved. We laugh. We have moments. We get to the point of where we need to be, but we don't take the direct road. There's a lot of storytelling involved. So it's a unique way to have conversation with our people in the way they want, but it was online. And so we started pitching this idea to different government departments, and they said, they'll never work. Indigenous people don't like to communicate online. I'm like, I know, but maybe they would. Enter COVID. And there was no way to have conversations, to continue engagement with Indigenous communities because you couldn't travel to them. And so our model was the one that had been put together, it had been thought out, we had a methodology developed, we had a process developed, and we were able to do the work that we do across the country. It was very exciting work. It was a lot of work at time. But that was a successful partnership that we'd had because it was built on our values, what was important to us. We were learning about each other, our skills were very different, but it was an opportunity to work together on something new. So when we talked about the joint venture, my partner had said to me, is there something in your language that you would like to have represented in the name of our company? So I looked through, I was still learning my language, and the name Quinganawal came up. So Quinganawal, it's a Lenape word, and it means I see you. It's our hey, our hello, our hi. That's how we say, we greet each other, but it's acknowledging you see the person, and it's a good thing. So our company is called Quinganawal Engagement Services, or KES. In that company, I'm the majority owner. I'm the majority decision maker too. And it's based on our values, my Lenape values. The way that we set the company up, that's what it's based on. And so I felt very supported from my partner in that. One of the projects we'd taken on with Indigenous policing. And I'd said, here's a step that's not included in what they're requesting us to do. And it's important in the way we talk to people. So we'd invented something called pre-briefing, which is before you actually have the engagement in the conversation, you talk with Indigenous communities and make sure that they have all the information they need to be able to step into that conversation. And Indigenous policing was very complex. It had a lot of different levels and information that was available. So I said, you need to talk to the audience before you talk to the audience and make sure that capacity is there, that understanding. What are we here to do? What's the history? Providing all of that first. And my business partner didn't understand it. He said, I don't know why this is important to you, but I'm going to fight alongside you to make it happen. And he did. So that was important to me. And that's really, KES. Now we're looking at incorporating, we're looking at a very strong future with two separate companies who still exist separately, but then we have some overlap in the middle. So our logo as well is very important. It's two rings that are interlocking. So on one hand, that represents two-eyed seeing. And so they have their strengths here and we have our strengths here, but there's some overlap in the middle where we exist together. Another piece is the partnership agreement. So this is very important. I had another situation. I had someone who was interested in working closely with me. And he said, we should drop a partnership agreement, how we're going to work together. And I like this. I like this approach. I was like, everything will be written down. This is great. I said, great. If you wanted to write it up and then send it over to me, and then I can take that to my lawyer. And he said, oh, don't worry about your lawyer. I've got my lawyer. I don't want you to have an extra cost. I thought, okay. I kind of put that on the side and we continued to work on what this agreement should look like. Then he'd said, we should consider incorporation. At the time, I was a sole proprietor. So incorporation was somewhere I wanted to go, but I didn't really understand it fully. So I said, I'll need to talk with my accountant first. I need to talk with them and understand really what incorporation is and if that's the right step. Then he said, you can talk to my accountant. So then it doesn't cost you more. Then I was starting to feel uncomfortable. And so I took a step back. I said, I need to think on my own about whether this is a good idea. And there's a lot more pushing on me to move in a direction that I wasn't comfortable. So I'd said, I don't think I can do this anymore. This is not the partnership for me. I don't feel heard. I feel pushed into a direction that I don't know anything about. And I feel like you're bringing out these resources and relationships with people that I don't have. I don't have that level of trust for your accountant or your lawyer. They represent you, not me. And he was quite upset and disrespectful as well in that conversation. That's how I knew that wasn't the partner for me either. And then I started working with another group. We're working through a partnership agreement right now. They have their lawyers and accountants and I have mine, and we work together, but it's really, when you're looking at a partnership, I think the first steps are really looking at, do your values align? And it is not a quick overnight conversation. It's a relationship that you have to build first. There could be an opportunity in front of you. And I've had multiple people reaching out to me to say, here's this, it's due in 2 weeks. Let's put a joint venture in. And I go, no, thank you. There's a lot of opportunities out there, but if you don't have that partnership and that relationship first, you're going to find out right in the middle of a project who that person is. And then you're kind of stuck and you can't go anywhere. So it's important to take a look at how your values align first. And if that partner is not willing to take the time to understand your values, to see how it lines up with theirs, to share their values with you, they're not looking for a partnership. There's always kind of there's a common piece in the middle. You've got to look for that. And then looking for opportunities for growth. So I had one partner, when we stepped together, we were looking at a joint venture, and it was the kind of 33-66 split. So 33 for my company, 66 for theirs. And I said, that's okay to start. I'm a smaller company. As I grow though, I like to take a look at more of a 50-50 split. I feel like that's an equal partnership. And the response was, whoa, I don't know about that. I'm in this for the 33 and the 66 split. Probably not a partner either. They're not going to support your growth and what you do. Buying policies, I think, are very important. Understanding, does your partner support other Indigenous businesses? So for my company, our buying policy is Indigenous first. And that typically includes a higher cost. You're going to pay more to shop at Indigenous businesses than you are at big box stores. But I'll take the Indigenous businesses first. Does your company, do your partners have buying policies? Are they willing to buy Indigenous first, even if it's going to cost more? After we shop Indigenous first, we look to local. Then we go to the big box stores eventually. But if we can support our local communities and our Indigenous communities, and if you have a partner who will get on board with the same buying policies, that's kind of an alignment of your values as well. So I think that's pretty important too. Someone who supports your opportunity for growth, someone who understands the requirements in the set aside. and the control that you have as well to that. It's important that you understand that too. Oftentimes in conversations, being Indigenous, being a woman and sitting in boardrooms full of people that don't look like me, it's been hard to have my voice heard. But that's where if you don't feel you're in control, if you don't feel that you're supported by the other people in that room, it's probably not the partnership for you. So it can be very difficult to put brakes on things. It can feel like it's not productive. But I think as a people, one of the things that's important to us is ensuring that we take time to think and to process and to make sure that's the right thing that we want to do. So this one, what I like about this is it's talking about partnerships. You know, there's this competition, there's this colonial view of this, you know, this hierarchy, this better or more, you've got more or less than someone else. When really, I think it's a matter of changing our perspective and taking a look at, you know, how we can all get to the finish line together, how we can support each other. When I started out as a consultant, I was told, you know, if you're talking with a client and they ask if you can do something, if it's not something you could do, you say, yes, I can do that. And then you go home and you learn how to do it. I disagree with that. I think if we're working in partnership with each other, I just need to find someone else who can be really great, who can excel in that area. And that's what I do. So I've partnered up with a lot of Indigenous organizations, and you know, where their specialization, they specialize here and I specialize here, there's an opportunity at partnership then. I don't need to learn what they do. I just need to be able to work with them on the projects in front of us. So that's what we've done in a lot of different areas, and it's been great. You find some really great camaraderie. There's a couple of, especially Indigenous women-owned businesses that I've been able to work with quite successfully. And it's exciting because then for one, you're not alone. You're not the only owner. You're not the only decision maker in the room. You've got partners. It's a little less scary when you do that. One thing that I was just, you know, sitting and thinking through is that, you know, like we're people that are starting to thrive in an environment we were not meant to exist in. And I think it's time now for us to change the environment. So stepping away from competition, looking at sustainability, looking at getting to the finish line together. One thing I learned from, I'd sat in a meeting with some Maori business owners, and they shared their values, and they were based on elements of war or fighting. It was very assertive, very aggressive. And I thought, that's what I need to be. I need to be taller. I need to be more, you know, direct, you know, in my approach. And it's helped a lot. It's helped a lot to get further ahead. My voice has been heard. I can sit at those board tables now and be more confident in the way that I share my views and what's important in making those decisions. And so when you find the right people to work with, it makes things a lot easier. So I would encourage, after today's talk, or you know, down the road, if you'd like to reach out to me, we especially get excited working with new businesses, potential partners. We love working with youth, sharing what we do, how we do it, so that other people can do it too. That doesn't create more competition. It creates more opportunities, and especially women as well. So we like working with women owners. They do so much, multitask. It's exciting. So I appreciate being able to speak today. Thanks very much. I went over a little bit. Thank you. Anishik, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah, for providing insights on the federal Indigenous procurement policy, but also giving us some insight onto partnerships and how we can get the most out of them. We are at break time. I believe are we at break time?
Our thing is just messed up. But yeah, so before we go into our final two presentations, we're gonna take another quick health break. Instead of 10 minutes though, this one's just gonna be 5 minutes to catch up on time.
We'll give you 7. We'll meet back here at 3 if that's cool.
On the agenda, it's like 2 after the health break, but ours was only 1.
Yeah, because it went presentation. Oh, we messed that up because this is supposed to be.
I know.
Oh,
It's like I
well,
So now we're on
So,
this one
yeah. That's cool.
and then just cross out this.
Yeah, because I did say there was a health break after this presentation. Our
Yeah.
notes are wrong.
Yeah.
The agenda is right. Well, most of the agenda is right.
Yeah.